Welcome to the Hot Rod Hangout Podcast.
Whoop, whoop.
I'm Matt.
And I'm Ashley.
And tonight we got a special guest, Robert Rowley with the Built C-Max. What's going on, man?
How y'all doing? We doing pretty good tonight?
Oh, we live in a dream. So, kind of met you on a pretty fun adventure. We have a mutual friend in Tyler Yon with Why Not, and he was like, hey, man, I got this chance to go to Sick Week. And I was like, cool. Hope he's not an axe murderer. And, but so what originally got you into this crazy car obsession?
I've always been tinkering with stuff. And it started out with Briggs & Stratton lawnmowers. And the only way to go from there was up. So I went to go-karts and then, got your driver's license and then you had cars. So cars are a lot more fun and you can go a lot more places with a car than you can a go-kart or a Briggs & Stratton.
Yeah, definitely easy when you can drive them and you don't have to trailer them.
For sure.
Speaking of that, what was your first car?
My first car was a 1995 Chevrolet S10.
Okay. Did you do anything to it or just kind of that was the first? Didn't really.
We did some simple stuff to it. We obviously put a straight pipe exhaust on it like any good teenage kid will do, and then because it was a truck, we had to have a bed stack with a flapper on it. But other than that, it was a bone stock 2.2 liter 4-cylinder with a 5-speed transmission. It was nothing more than get you to work and back.
Okay. So what's the current build? I know you didn't. You end up taking something different. But what was the build?
So the build for Sick Week was going to be a 1995 OBS Ford with a LV7 Duramax swapped into it.
Pissing off the purists one way or the other. We do it with small blocks and Ford products. You do it with a Duramax and a Ford product. I like it.
Yeah, we've got the C-Max, the 67 C10 that has got the Duramax in it. The problem with that is the chassis is just too heavy. The truck weighs 7,200 pounds on the old setup before we put the flatbed on it. So trying to get 7,200 pounds moving in a hurry doesn't work. It's fantastic for burnouts, but it doesn't work for drag racing or anything really competitive. And the truck is two-wheel drive, so we can't use it in dirt drags or anything else. So I'm kind of stuck in a corner with how far we could go with that truck. And at the end of the day, I started doing a little bit of research, and what I wanted to do was put the Duramax into a Ford Ranger and try to cut down on as much of the weight as we could. But at the end of the day, the point was we were going to, because I've got the built C-Max, we were going to do the built F-Max because it's an F-Series truck with a Duramax in it, so the name lined up a lot better than what the Ranger was going to. And then, of course, with the weight too, we started doing a whole bunch of research into weight and what we could actually fit all of the components in, because a Duramax and an Allison isn't exactly small. Where, if we did the Ranger, I think we could have gotten away with like a 4L80, but it's still, you're going to be $15,000 into a 4L80 to hold up to diesel torque, regardless of the weight. So the Allison is just a far bigger, beefier transmission. Shifts a little bit slower, weighs a little bit more, but the clutches are bigger, the shafts are bigger. It's just a more robust system, and the goal right now is to have something that's overbuilt and underpowered.
Pretty much. That's keeps you from roadside repairs. What made you hop on the drag and drive stuff?
So last year I did Sick Week with Nick in the Plymouth Track van, and it was just an absolute riot. Trailer burnouts everywhere we went. And of course, running an 11-second van was pretty fun as well. And it was just a good time. And, we do a good bit of the previous years we've done a good bit of truck shows and car shows and stuff like that with stuff, which is, it's fun to be able to go and look at everything sitting in a parking lot, but it's another thing to be able to see stuff going down the track. And then, of course, for these cars to be actual street cars, not something you put onto a trailer, take to the track, run down the track, and then put it back on the trailer.
Yeah, very true. And street car is kind of the rat rod of drag racing. That's the biggest misrepresented term. What is a street car? But,
yeah, I know that's been a big debate on the internet as to, is it something that is simply, is it tagged and registered, or, everybody's got their own way of looking at it.
Well, and I mean, you really can't argue a fact after they make a 1,200-mile trip. I mean, it's kind of whatever your balls can handle. If you got big enough ones to swing and you want to put it on the road, well, then do it.
Yep, if you want to drive a pro mod on the street, go for it.
I mean, wouldn't be my first choice for the daily class, but I mean, if you can deal with, I mean, on our stuff, it's dealing with your bullshit, and that's kind of your builds are kind of dealing with your bullshit, heavy. I mean, everything diesel is like they don't make lightweight parts that are going to hold up to diesel torque, unfortunately.
Nope, and that's the sad part is horsepower goes fast, torque destroys stuff.
Yeah. Well, horsepower is how fast you get there. Torque's how far you push the wall when you hit it.
Yeah.
So I've been following you a little bit, and you're kind of doing some crazy stuff with the Allison transmissions, stuff that I've never heard. Are you the only one, or are there a few guys out there that are kind of going nuts on the Allison stuff? Or
There are definitely plenty of other people that do a good bit with the Allisons. I mean, you could probably throw a rock and hit 10 different Allison builders out there. I mean, every state's got one, and the whole bunch of guys discuss the Allisons back and forth. I think the biggest thing with the Allison is, like I said, they're big, heavy, heavy duty transmissions. They're not hot rod transmissions. They're not drag racing transmissions. They're overbuilt truck transmissions is what they are. So for the guys that have got a Duramax, you can flash a really hot tune into it and blow straight through the transmission. The transmission is basically the first weak leak that you run into. Probably should put a lift pump on it before you put a hot tune on it, but you could put a hot tune on it and destroy that transmission really quick. So there's a very large market for the transmissions just because of how easy it is to flash a tune in, and then you need a transmission. You're not going to make it to work the next day without a transmission. So a lot of guys go through and build them. I've been definitely building a couple of them. My biggest thing is doing the burnout stuff. Nobody's built burnout transmissions. The clutch tolerances are very different. The way that you have to set the transmission up is very different. It's not like drag racing. It's not like street racing. You're not trying to make the thing shift fast. You're trying to make it hold through a lot of RPM consistently. So completely different build. And I mean, could somebody build something similar? I'm sure with enough time and money you could build something similar. But to get to the point where we are with the knowledge that we have, I don't think there's any other builders out there. But the problem is, who's buying a burnout transmission for a Duramax with an Allison?
yeah, the market's pretty slim. But I think with building up an Allison transmission, you're gonna, the more you do, because diesel has became pretty mainstream now. You're starting to get dedicated diesel drag racing leagues and stuff like that. So it's kind of bringing the underground stuff that, just a few people were messing with. You're starting to see 3,000 and 4,000 horsepower diesel motors that never were meant to make big power. They just made huge torque, and now all of a sudden, things are coming around.
Yeah, but I feel like a lot of the guys that are doing the drag racing stuff with the big power and the diesels are still focused on more of a drag racing transmission. So you end up with the the Turbo 400s, the 4L80s, and the 48 REs, the Dodge transmissions, which are just derivatives of the old 727. So like it's still a drag racing transmission, so to speak, which realistically, if you're trying to go fast, that's what you want. I mean, if we were trying to build a strictly a competition truck, I'd probably be using a Turbo 400 or a 4L80. I wouldn't be using the Allison. But for the application that I'm using it for, I want the durability, and I'm willing to throw away, have that extra weight and then have a slower shift time and then have significantly more power losses. An Allison, you'll lose about 25% of the power that you run through the thing versus like a 4L80 where you lose about 15%. So it's a loss that I am willing to take, and it's a loss that I think is worth it because with the power that I lose, I gain in reliability. So we can do an entire drag and drive and not have to worry about, it's Thursday, we need to change the transmission out.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a built tranny in behind my Cummins because it's got a little bit of tune up in it. And the amount of money, I seen the receipts and the amount of money that the guy dumped into it, I was like, you could have bought I could have made a really, really fast gasoline motor with a badass transmission for what you paid just for the work on the transmission. So it's definitely not cheap.
The biggest thing that's really, Yeah, definitely not cheap. It's the biggest thing that's always kept me away from the Cummins platform. I love the Cummins engine. It's a fantastic engine. It's good at making power. The problem is it's backed by a Dodge transmission, and whether you're making 300, 400 horsepower, you got to put a $10,000 transmission behind it. Whether it's a built 48, built 68, and even the built 68s don't live that long. So why spend all of that money to not have something that's going to be there in 5 years?
That was when I went and I actually bought my truck not far from you in Coleman, and the dealership I bought it from was like, "Oh yeah, it's a built trans and it's got a lifetime warranty." And I'm like, "It's a Dodge Trans, ain't no such thing." And I did call the guy that built it, and he said, "Yep, if you break it, call me." And I was like, "Are you serious?" He's like, "As long as you don't do nothing crazy more with the motor other than what was done to it," he said, "it should live." And I'm like, "It's that should that's got me questioning it." And he's like, "Nope." I was like, "It's going to Florida." He's like, "I'll send a trailer with a rental truck." He said, "If you break it, I'll come get it." And I was like, "Okay, well," but it's tuned and tuned. And then I had to get a different tune because I can't remember the guy's name that tuned it originally, but the previous owner took the card with him, so I couldn't flash the tunes back in it after the turbo. So it's got a fleece, still has the variable geometry turbo and all that stuff on it, but the bigger fleece turbo and stuff like that. And none of that stuff is easy on the pocketbook.
Oh, none of it is. I mean, the biggest thing too is like guys that are looking to get into the diesel stuff, take whatever the gas equivalent is and add another zero to it.
Pretty much. So what is the plan, the end goal for the F-Max?
So the end goal for the F-Max is really just to pick up where the 67 left off. Like I said, we ran out of truck, and the other thing too is we ran into a lack of safety in it. There was no cage in the 67. There was no fire suppression in the 67, and doing the burnouts, I think almost every single time we competed in a Cletus and Cars or burnout event with the 67, it caught on fire. Not that our goal was to have it to catch on fire, but it's just the way that the system worked. I mean, you're doing a 2 minute long burnout with the EGTs, so they're just insane. Stuff gets hot, rubber melts, plastic melts, catches on fire. It's a bad time. So we knew probably at the end of 22, beginning of 23, that I needed to build a completely different chassis and actually step the game up for safety, and then of course be able to keep doing the R&D and everything else that we were doing with the truck, because that's what it was. The 67 was where I started a lot of the diesel stuff. I wanted to be able to build my own engines, my own transmissions, my own truck essentially, and there wasn't really an easy way to go about learning it. So we started with the truck, and then we went through probably 12, 13 different engines in 22 throughout the burnout competitions. And I mean, a lot of guys will sit there and look at that and be like, "Oh, well, you don't know how to build an engine." But at the end of the day, nobody's competing in the arena that we're competing in. So, not knowing how to build an engine is very accurate, but it's building an engine for that application. You can't take a drag application and put it into a 2 minute long burnout. You're taking something that runs 11 seconds and trying to make it hold on for 2 minutes. That's a very different time window. Same thing for dyno operations or even sled pulling guys. Sadly, the sled pulling guys were the closest people that I could talk to that had any real orientation as to how to build this stuff to be able to live up to the burnout world. But it got to the point where it didn't make sense with the 67, and we knew that we needed to go to a different chassis. So in 24, we did the Poor Diesel Challenge, and when we did that, I built the Shorty, and we were going to pick up with that, but we ran into basically the same thing, the same issue with that truck of it being 6,200 pounds with me in it, and that was no cage, full interior, and a bit of different other stuff. But I mean, there was just no way to get the weight out of it, and if we wanted to do drag racing or dirt drags or something like that, we just had to get the weight out of it. So original plan was a Ford Ranger. We figured that'd be a really good way to get it down to just basically an engine and a transmission. And ended up being a buddy had the that F-150 that we used for the F-Max. So it's a really good, it's a buddy's truck. So the truck's already got some history to begin with. And then the F-150, the OBSs. So whether it's an F-150, 250, 350, all the OBS chassis have the same frame. So the frame is significantly lighter, and we come into this game already 1,500 pounds or 1,600 pounds lighter than what the Duramax Shorty was. So we've already lost a ton of weight just by using the Ford setup, which is what we were looking to do. But then keeping it in that OBS setup, it still is a full size truck, so nobody's gonna be like, "Oh, you're cheating by using a mini truck or something like that." Even though we've cut basically as much weight out of this thing as we can.
Yeah, and Gale Banks did it with he did an S10 with I think his was a Cummins, wasn't it? With the
I want to say it was an S10 with a Duramax, and it was part of the Sidewinders deal.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
I know Firepunk has done an S10 with a Cummins in it. So.
Yeah, they're not cheating. I mean, both of those trucks did well, but I get my Model A is pushing the envelope, doing something weird. So I kind of get the not wanting to follow the trend. It would be easier, yes, but sometimes easy isn't cool.
Yeah, but I mean, like, the thing is really not so much to be a competition truck. That's what I had to have a conversation with myself about, is like, yeah, we're going to have a cage in it. Yeah, we'll do dragon drives, burnout competitions, whatever we want. But at the end of the day, it's really just a point of R&D where I can try something new, whether it's a different tune-up, whether it's a different piston design, or whatever we want to try in the truck. And then if it blows up, I'm able to simply put it at the farm and then work on it whenever I want to. And I still have the 67 as a full-size pickup truck to run around the farm and get the chores done and not feel bad about it being blown up and trying to put it back together to get some work done.
Yeah, exactly. So, unlimited build or unlimited budget, what are you building?
I don't even know. I mean, I think the problem for me is I have gone through so many vehicles throughout my life, and I've kind of experienced everything. Like, I've kind of already done it all, if that makes sense, and it's just, I don't know what I would do with it. I'd probably build the F-Max. Well, it depends on the application. If it's an unlimited build that I have to daily drive every single day, and it's the only vehicle that I have, we'll probably set up something completely different. But if it's just something that I can to play with, yeah, it'll be the F-Max.
That's cool. Realizing the goal. You're the first person that said I already got it. Most people go funky. Yeah.
The biggest thing is to make sure that 12-year-old me is happy with what we're doing today. So if he's not happy with the goal, we're going the wrong direction.
That's a good way to think about it. So out of all of the events, I know you do Cletus, I know you do Burnout Wars and all that. What is your favorite show or event to go to that you try to make every year?
Every Cletus and Cars at the Freedom Factory. What Cletus has done with that track is absolutely insane. I was there at the first event, and I will continue to support that track until the day that it closes.
Yes, yeah. Cletus has done a lot for motorsports, whether it's burnouts, whether it's drag racing, the street car stuff. Shit, he just racing ARCA. I mean, he's definitely living the car guy dream.
Yeah, but I mean, that's kind of what brought the 67 to life, was if he could restore an old racetrack, I could restore that old C10 that was sitting there in the field. So he got his racetrack done for the first event, and I got the 67 done for the first event, and that's kind of what kicked a lot of that off.
That's cool. Is there a show or event that you've never been to that you'd like to make it to?
I don't think so. I mean, like, a lot of the stuff is kind of whatever pops up and it happens. I know, like, Cletus and Cars, whenever he first announced that he had the track, that he was bringing it together and he was putting it together for Cletus and Cars, I knew I'd have to be at that one. And then, of course, getting into the truck scene, the original Daytona truck meet, had to go to that one. And then, of course, we've already done Sick Week. I co-piloted for Rocky Mountain Race Week. We've done Diesels of New York. We've done UCC. I mean, basically all the events that you could possibly ask to do, we've been there, we've done them. And for the most part, we've done pretty good at everything that we've tried so far.
Cool. And you said you co-piloted Rocky Mountain. What were you co-piloting for that?
I was co-piloting with Nick in the Burnout van.
Oh, okay.
Yet again, that's kind of the go-to right now, is him and I will... Basically, he's got the van, I co-pilot, do all the directions, navigation, and everything else, and It's really nice to be able to go and experience the event without having to bring your own vehicle there. That way you have an idea as to what you're getting yourself into instead of just showing up and not knowing what's happening.
Yeah, we're gonna try. I'm gonna try to get in for sick week next year with the Model A, but it probably will end up in sick ward because I don't know if I want to put enough cage in it to be competitive, and I don't want to go and not be competitive. So
I completely understand that.
I with the straight axle, and you and Tyler Tyler figured out, you were probably standing there, figured out that they will let air ride in that class. So, but they were running like 10.8s, and I'm like, oh, that's close. Oh, this year they were running like low 10s, and I'm like, that's pushing the envelope a little bit more than I wanted to do in my raggedy ass Model A. But so I don't want to just show up to show up. I think it would be a cool experience. So we'll probably do sick ward next year, and then I'll probably get the bug and want to build something or add cage or whatever to the Model A to make it work.
Yeah, but that's the thing about Sick Week is it's basically the Super Bowl of drag and drives. You've got so many other drag and drives out there, like Rocky Mountain Race Week, like Hot Rod Drag Week, and there's one or two more of them. But everything said and done, Sick Week is kind of the one that is the big one that everybody shows up to. I mean, Brett LaSalle literally just set another record this past go around, and if you're somebody, that's the one that you go through and do. So if you're looking just to be able to get the Model A and start pushing it in something, maybe start looking for a different drag and drive that isn't going to be attracting anybody from across the United States to compete in.
And my thing is, I've been around drag racing for a while. I've been, and everything that I kind of do, I try to push myself to, like, I don't want to just show up. I want to show out. So, and I don't want to get to a point, and that's kind of why I was like, oh, the hot rod class, it's limited. You can only go so fast on a straight axle. You got to keep it conventional, yada, yada, yada. And then I'm like, oh, shit, I guess they can push them a little further than. So, was Sick Week the first drag and drive that you did your own, like, driving, not co-piloting?
Correct. So that was the first time that I was like, we're going to take a truck and we're going to go and have fun with it, which the original plan was to take the Ford, but obviously it didn't make the cut. So our backup plan was the 67, which at this point in time has got the flatbed on it, the dually set up, and all the toolboxes, and is over 10,000 pounds, which is even heavier than all the weight that I'm trying to cut out of everything. But we knew that we couldn't be fast, so we were at least going to be functional. And I mean, boy, did Tyler show up to party.
So tell us about the week. Now, I know you ran in, lost a toolbox after you spent an hour organizing it. We all seen that video.
I feel like that's how y'all met me, which was a fantastic impression to give off. A full 300-piece toolbox flying off of the back of the truck. But no, it was interesting because the original plan was to take the Ford, so we were building the Ford based around the whole event. We just ran out of time, ran out of parts, and ran out of energy to be able to get the thing done. So at that point in time, either A, you don't go at all, or B, you move to whatever a backup plan is that you can kind of configure together. So I thought about taking the diesel Mercedes, but if you take the diesel Mercedes, you're not really able to take the camper or trailer or anything with you. And at that point, you're literally just going from one track to the next track, putting a time in a daily driver. And whenever you're racing, you're pushing these cars to the limit and whatnot, and stuff that's lightweight and designed to be very efficient usually breaks with the driving that you do, because it's not take it off of the trailer, run it down the track, and put it back on the trailer. You're going down some of these roads, and they are absolutely brutal on stuff. And sure enough, a couple people lost some trailer hitches, and we ended up the 67 is basically used as a farm truck now, and one of the things that you got to have on there is a welder to be able to put back all the stuff that's on the tractor when the bush hog breaks or the tiller breaks or the bucket on it, whatever. Something's going to break, and you're going to need a welder to put it together. So that ended up working out pretty good for a lot of the guys there. But the truck was by no means ready to go on sick week, and the fact that we passed tech was absolutely insane to us. So the truck has got a pretty bad oil leak. It's leaking roughly a quart for every 500 miles. So a good size oil leak to it, and it's somewhere out of the back of the motor. And we've got about 8 hours to get there and then go through tech, so it's not enough time to be able to pull the transmission out and try to figure out what's leaking or be able to get parts or anything else. So we hooked the trailer up to the truck, ran all the way down there to South Georgia Motorsports Park, crashed in the hotel, got up the next day, went over to Lowe's and found the biggest Tupperware tote that we could possibly buy, and the lid for it. Our original plan was to take the tote and then cut the tote to have about a 2-inch like China lip to be able to make a diaper for it to keep it from leaking oil on the track, because leaking oil on the track is frowned upon. However, when we were at Lowe's, Tyler found this amazing bucket lid that had like a 3 or 4 inch lip on it, and we were able to sandwich that between the oil pan and the front cross member, and then just use a ratchet strap to hold it up against the transmission so that we had a really good a catch to make sure that we weren't putting any oil or anything on the track for all the other racers, because you don't want to be that guy.
No, that's not the place you want to be, especially with South Georgia. Y'all only got one run, so ruin somebody's day quickly.
Yeah, which is normally how the drag and drive stuff goes. Is day one, everybody's showing up with race cars that haven't been tested, and they're just trying to get there and everything else. And the motor doesn't have any passes on it, and they'll go make a pass, the first pass on it, trying to put down a good time to be able to get a good step out into the game. And motor will come apart, and it'll be oil down, or it'll be transmission, or it'll just be something after the other. Whenever you start doing these drag and drives, so. We knew having a 10,000-pound service truck, there was no way that we were going to be fast or competitive. So we just made sure that we weren't, leaking any oil or doing anything ignorant, and got a time slip.
And then the drive down to into Florida. Y'all, I mean, pretty much though, y'all were pretty you yourselves were pretty much problem free, right? I mean, other than the pull over and get some oil pressure back in it and.
Yeah, we started the event with a lot more oil pressure, and then throughout the entire week, it just kept losing oil pressure. So when we left Birmingham, Alabama, we had about 60 pounds of oil pressure, and when I got back to Birmingham, Alabama, we had about 15 to 20 pounds of oil pressure at 2,100 RPM. So that motor is losing something. I haven't taken it apart, still runs and drives, and I'll probably just leave it at 15 pounds of oil pressure until it kicks a rod out the side of it, and then put another engine into it. But who knows? Maybe I'll get adventurous with it and pull the engine out and figure out why it's not making any oil pressure.
Man, Duramaxes must be cheaper in Alabama or something.
I don't think that they're cheap. It's just like whatever you do, everything seems to flock to you for some reason. So
that's true.
I think the other side of it is you see a lot more opportunities when you know what you're looking at. So I regularly just, if I see a junkyard, I'll stop and go walk through the yard and see what's there. And you never know what you're going to find. And I think so far we found 3 or 4 different Duramaxes. So when you can find a Duramax out of a junkyard around here, they charge you $350 for the entire motor. I'm grabbing my tools out of the truck and pulling that motor for $350, and I will continue to stack them at the farm until there ain't no space for them or the junkyards ain't got any more.
Yeah, and that's true, because like when I was looking for my Model A, I couldn't find one, bought it, and then I had 2 or 3 buddies, hey, you still looking for a Model A? I got one sitting here, and it's like, really? For like half the price that I paid for mine too. Like, I'm like, you didn't have to give me the salt in the wound, man. Like, plus I had just taken the fenders off and found all the hidden rust and pulled the interior out of it, and I'm like, oh, so that's where all the rust was. We were waiting for it. So yeah, like you said, if you play with stuff, your Facebook marketplace and your phone listens to you and all of a sudden suggests you to find stuff.
Yeah, all the stuff that you're looking for, you'll eventually run across. And I mean, I think the other thing too is knowing to keep an eye out for the opportunity, because you don't know when you're going to need that spare engine, but eventually with the way that I go through Duramaxes, I know eventually I'll need it. So, there's been times where we've been, like I said, we've been going across the country, just, see a junkyard and you're like, you know what, I'm going to walk through the junkyard, see what they got today.
Yeah.
And you'll see an engine. You're in the middle of Ohio. Do you want to pull a Duramax out with some basic tools in the middle of Ohio? No, but 6 months later when you're going, you need a Duramax or something, it's a lot easier just to take that junkyard motor and throw it in than it is to try to find somebody selling a Duramax, because whenever you're in need, that's when people usually start really raising the prices and you have to pay whatever market value is because it's in demand at that point in time.
Yes. And that's the car market right now, especially running and driving vehicles with tax time coming. Now we just added the 20% redneck rich. You just got your tax return, so you can afford to pay a little extra. I'm avoiding buying anything.
Crazy. Yeah, exactly. You're trying to save all this money, but you're like, what in the world?
Yeah. I got a lot of stuff I need to sell while people have money, but I just hate dealing with people on Marketplace. Does it run? It's available? An intake. Yeah, is it available? That's the best one. No, I just got it posted because I thought it would be cool to have it, have listings.
No, Facebook Marketplace has been interesting. And I mean, even like the used car market, ever since COVID happened, everything kind of really tanked. And of course, we've got inflation and everything else. So I remember, pre-2020, we'd be able to buy $500 cars running and driving and be able to get a year, 2 years out of them. And now it seems to be the $1,500 is the new $500 just to be able to buy like a Honda Civic from the 90s, which is insane to me considering that, the 20 years ago was 2005, not 1990 something.
Yeah. Now, I know you mess with your Mercedes are actually Mercedes diesels, right? Or are you swapping Duramaxes in them too?
Nope, they are Mercedes diesels. So I am a firm believer that you can't talk crap on a certain platform until you have owned it. So I have had the Power Strokes, I've had the Cummins, I've had the Duramaxes, I've had the Volkswagen TDIs, I've done small blocks, big blocks, LSs. I've done some small block Fords. I mean, a small block Ford and a small block Chevrolet, same deal, different brand. Parts availability is just worse. So with all of that, I mean, we started with the gas burner stuff. I feel like we've graduated to the diesel stuff, and as such, I've done the Duramaxes. Duramaxes are probably my favorite platform for the longest time. However, with that market finally coming around and just, everything's getting more and more expensive, we'll use it for a race truck, but it's not a good application, I feel like, anymore to keep doing all this R&D stuff on. So looking more so towards the future of what diesel performance is going to look like in my agenda, cutting down on weight is one of the biggest things that we can do. And I love the Volkswagen TDIs. However, they don't have a big enough displacement to be a performance-oriented motor. Can you make them perform? Yes, but a 1.9, a 2-liter just doesn't have enough displacement in it to really be competitive with LSs or something like that. And it's kind of what drove me to the Mercedes. They have got a very rich history of diesel engines. So they've got like the OM617, which is a 5-cylinder diesel that doesn't really make a lot of power, but is incredibly reliable and is very well mass-produced by Mercedes, and a lot of people know about them. The thing, though, is you really can't make that much performance out of them, and they don't have that big of an aftermarket. So it's closer to what the TDI motors are than what the performance-oriented stuff goes, which makes them great for swaps, but not good for performance. And then, of course, we move into what I've been stacking up lately, which has been Mercedes OM606s, which is it's like the 12 valve of the car diesels. They're 3 liters, twin overhead cam, mechanical pump, and they just tickle my autism because they're an indirect injected diesel that has the ability to make 500, 600 horsepower very easily. So if you've got a 3-liter that weighs 450, 460 pounds that you can easily make 500 horsepower with, and the thing will rev. It's not like the standard Duramaxes where, you start spinning at $4,000, 4,200. you're turning a lot of weight really quick, whereas the OM 606 right out of the box will go over 5,000 RPM, which is a lot of RPM for a diesel.
Yes.
Diesel fuel does not burn fast. So for Mercedes to be able to be like, here's the keys to a vehicle that can burn diesel fast, fancied me. And it's one of the things of where I haven't owned one before. I found one on Facebook Marketplace for a little over $1,000. And in today's market, if I can buy a diesel car for a little bit over $1,000, sign me up. So we got one of those. And then literally last week, I went and picked up another OM 606 from Tennessee. So now we've got two of them, which works out so that I don't really have to be gun shy about keeping it together. I can go ahead and blow it up and know that I have another one sitting there ready to go.
And with it being mechanical, a swap into something would be easier because you don't have all the computer control shit that makes the 12 valve the common swap when you go into a diesel, because give it fuel and make it run. A couple of
I mean I got lucky with the Mercedes that I found because they were the early 124 chassis, so they have a mechanical pump out of the factory. If you buy the 96 and up OM 606s, they have what's referred to as an EDC pump, which is very similar to the VE pumps out of the Cummins, except it still is an inline pump on the Mercedes, but it's an electronically controlled mechanical pump, so there's no way to easily do a swap on that without grabbing like a very early 606 or a 603 pump, which realistically, if you're trying to make power out of one of these things, you're already going to go to like a 603 style pump to be able to get the bigger elements, to be able to get more fuel through the motor, to be able to make the bigger power numbers. Yeah. But as you've seen with all of my builds with the Duramaxes, I'm not scared of wires, and I think realistically the 606 is just going to be a stepping stone into the 648. I foresee doing a 606 swap into a light chassis, and then here in 2 to 5 years we'll switch over to the OM 648 and really just go absolute potatoes with something that the diesel industry really hasn't seen here in the States, because everybody's doing the Duramax Cummins thing, and it's great and all, but if I can get a diesel engine that weighs half the weight of a Duramax and is still able to make a very similar horsepower, sign me up.
Well, I mean, there's two ways to go quicker. I mean, less weight or more power. So if you can get the same amount of power and half the weight, obviously it's going to get there quicker.
Yeah, but I mean, it's also the way that you're able to make that power and how it all works. I mean, like I said, I like the RPM that's associated with the European diesels. They've definitely got a lot of that figured out. Plus, it's a better engine design, so to speak, because the OM 606s have got a bigger bore than a stroke, whereas a lot of the American diesels have got a longer stroke than a bore, just because you have to capitalize on the burn time of the fuel.
Right. And there's your tech tip
Definitely.
For Hot Rod Hangout podcast. I love it. Most people just gloss over it. This is awesome.
I started with the Briggs and Strattons, and then moved to the small blocks, and then to the big blocks, and then the LSs. And I feel like anybody that really dives into the performance orientation of engines will eventually end up at the diesel world, just because of how efficient they can still be while making big power.
Yes.
The LSs can kind of do it, but you lose so much fuel efficiency with a gas burner, because you have to be able to keep the octane up. You've got to be able to you can have a big boost or a lot of high compression, whichever way you want to look at it, in the gas burner side of things, but you have to have the fuel that's going to resist that nog. You're going to have that high octane. Mm-hmm. And as such, you either have to increase the total fuel that you're feeding through the system, or you have to buy a more expensive fuel or something else, which obviously you've got top fuel making way more power than what the diesels could ever dream about making. But, if you can have a 1,000 horsepower Duramax that still manages to get 25 miles to the gallon, that's just peak performance, in my opinion.
Oh, that's my truck. I mean, it doesn't make 1,000, but makes neighborhood close to that on 5. And 80 mile an hour towing a trailer, I get 22, 23. As a matter of fact, coming home, we were running down the interstate, and we had to get home. So I was running a little warm, and I slowed down when I got into Florida down to 70, 75, and the mileage went down. I went, so it likes 80. It likes 85 better. But And everybody sees the truck and it's 9 inches lifted and on 37s, and oh, your gas mileage got to be shitty. And I'm like, yeah, I get the same thing as your little Prius over there, but mine's way cooler. And it can roll black smoke whenever I want it to. So back to the autism thing, I like that.
Yep. That is definitely one of the peak features of the diesel, is the ability to roll cold.
Yes. And more fuel makes more power. And more fuel makes more black smoke. So it's inversely awesome.
Yeah, diesels are an extremely simple setup. You either don't have enough fuel or you don't have enough air.
Pretty much. So, what is one piece of advice that you would give somebody, whether you want to go specifically into the diesel side or car side, whatever advice you want to give for somebody that wants to get into this, whether it's drag and drive, whether it's just cars in general, whatever advice you have.
I think there's a couple pieces to that, but the one of the biggest thing is, like I said earlier, is the 12-year-old you that had a dream, that had an idea of what you could do later on in life. Listen to that 12-year-old and make that 12-year-old proud. The only person that's going to be capable of doing that is you. And then for whenever you start doing really oddball stuff, don't listen to anybody that hasn't done what you want to do. You're not going to ask somebody in Orlando, Florida, what the best place to eat is in China. They've never been to China. They don't know. You're better, if you're in China, talk to somebody there that knows the area. They'll be able to give you a way better place to eat than that dude in Orlando will. So same thing applies to whenever you're building your hot rods. If you want to make the best diesel engine, go and talk to a couple of guys that have played with diesel engines. If you want to have the fastest Coyote, go and talk to the guys that have got the fastest Coyotes. Don't listen to the guys that have a fast LS or something like that. That's going to really put you in the wrong direction for what you want to do. And realistically, you will eventually end up in a point where nobody has done what you want to do. So there is not going to be a right or a wrong way to do it. And as such, be ready to fail. You're going to fail a lot, and a lot of people are going to sit there and look at your failures and say, hey, you don't know what you're doing. But the reality is they don't either, and unless you keep failing, you'll never learn to accomplish the goal that you're trying to accomplish.
And I will say on that note, just to add, don't let somebody else dictate what you do. When you fail, people are going to tell you, hey, if you just do it this way, it'll be easier and it'll work. If you want to push the envelope, push it. Don't stop. Because it's very easily to fall back into a cookie cutter build. When I said I wanted to hide air ride in a front cross member, everyone told me I was stupid and it would never work. And it's going to, because I'm going to make it work. But the first time it failed, they're like, oh, yep, see, you should have just done it this way. It would have been easier. You'd have had your car together. I'm like, yeah, it would have, and that's been a complete redo now. So, and I'm allowed to say that on the podcast now. So,
well, it was just you had to do it.
Huh?
You just had to do it.
Yeah, it's just my favorite sound on TikTok, which we can't use because it's now you can't use it as a business account on TikTok. Is fuck it, I'll do it myself. But I was really mad because I had that sound saved because when that car got done, I was going to use it, and now it's gone. But, and doing stuff, like you said, you're doing stuff and you fail, or you're talking to people and they're going to try to drive you to what they're doing. If you have a Coyote and you go talk to an LS guy, they're going to tell you, oh, swap an LS in it. It's always what they're doing. And if you want to be different, you got to be different.
I think the other thing, too, is learn to fabricate. Don't be afraid to pick up a welder, pick up a grinder, and then just make whatever you want to make. I mean, a lot of people told me that you can never possibly mount an MP273 transfer case to an Allison. You'd have to use a clocking ring, and then you'd have to do a whole bunch of other shenanigans. And at the end of the day, I said, you know what? Grabbed the welder, made my own tail housing and everything else, and I bolted the transfer case directly onto it. You're not able to go and buy a tail housing for an Allison that'll allow you to bolt it directly onto there. But if you use a clocking ring at the power we're going to be making, you're going to just snap the input shaft or the output shaft. And, when you're breaking parts, you're not winning. So don't be afraid to, if you have an idea, make it happen. A lot of guys think that, oh, well, I can't buy this swap harness for this. Make your own harness. I can't buy this swap part for this. Make your own, whatever part it is, whether it's a motor mount, a bell housing adapter, whatever you need. Learn to fabricate, and that's what hot rodding originally was. And I feel like we've lost a lot of that in today's world. It's all go on to Summit and buy this part or buy that part or get this fuel pump with these injectors. Hot rodding is still the ability for you to build whatever you want to build.
Yes. And also have friends that support your want. Even if they don't necessarily want to do it your way, have people that will push you to be the better fabricator, or, our mutual friend Tyler. There's been times and I'm like, I just look at it and I'm like, dude, I got no clue what you're talking about. And he's like, we can do it. I'm like, okay. The frame rails. The reason that he was like, he was upset that he didn't weld my frame rails before he left. And I was like, dude, I'll be mad if you don't go. Get your ass up there. I welded them. They're fine. It just wasn't, I wasn't confident. And he was like, you got this. And if you don't, stop. I'll get it when I get home. Come home, they're all welded. Like, okay, cool. Everything's good. Everything worked out. I am actually smart enough to do it. It wasn't like, because I was like, oh, I'm going to mess it up. I'm going to make the kick-ups too high and all this, and even the floor and, all of it. And have somebody that does think outside of the box also helps when you're trying to do something and either, I've said it about Ashley even, her knowledge is less, but she'll be on the other side of the car, and I'm like, I just can't figure out how that square peg's going to fit in that round hole. And she's like, well, if you just flip it over, it's round on the other side. It'll slide right in. And it's like, it's perspective or seeing things, and that, like you said, was originally what hot rodding was. There was nobody out there that built full frames or chassis. They took what they had, they used what they had, and they made cool cars. When Ed Roth or George Barris or any of those guys were building their cars, they were all crazy. Oh, that'll never work. Well, it did. And now there's people that are trying to look for those cars to bring them back because no one did it like them. The innovators.
I think that's part of what you have to be able to get people to understand is you have to do whatever brings joy to your build. You don't have to be chasing a social media number. You don't have to be chasing a view count. You don't have to be trying to win a certain show. You have to make sure that 12-year-old you is going to be happy. And that 12-year-old you might not know that a MP273 doesn't bolt directly to an Allison, but, you can make it happen.
Yeah. And there's always a way. I mean, it might not be pretty and it might not be completely functional version 1, but you'll get there.
Be ready to fail. I mean, that's what one of the things that we're doing is we're doing a full manual valve body on the Allison. I mean, the Allisons have been around since 2001, and like I said, there are a ton of different Allison builders out there, and I know a lot of different people have tried to do a full manual valve body for the Allison, maybe not so much for the performance side of it, but to help with doing swaps. And the complexity of how the valve body works, how the transmission works, has just kind of kept everybody from doing it. And that was one of the things that I was trying to do the R&D on with the 67 back in 2022, 23, somewhere in there. And we got caught up with all the safety stuff. But I mean, I was in the middle of working on the valve body, and the valve body is now in the F-Max. So maybe we'll have a full manual valve body in that, but the reality is it's version 1. It might not work at all, and I'll have to take it out, put it back on the bench, and sit there and revalve how the whole thing is going to work, and then put it back into the truck, and then it might work, but it might not work good. And then you come out with version 3 and just be ready to fail, because without failure, it's part of the process. If you don't know how to take failure well, you're in for a rude awakening, because you're never going to do anything interesting because it's already been done if you're not failing.
And especially when you're pushing like that, even people that do make parts now and they're mass producing those parts, that's not the original part. They put a part out, said this is going to work. Oh, nope, it doesn't work. Or Oh, well, it needs to be a little skinnier on this side and a little fatter over there. Okay. Version 2, version 3, you know. I mean, there's a reason that it's WD-40 and not WD-1. You know, it took them 40 tries to get it right.
And they're still making all kinds of different formulas. They didn't stop at 40.
No. And I guarantee that anyone that's listening to this podcast has at least one can of it in their garage. And if you're like us, you got a can in every vehicle you own.
Just for good starting fluid.
You just forget to use it on squeaky 54 door hinges. The passenger door hinge on the 54 squeaks, and I have a can that's right behind the seat, and I have not sprayed it but one time, and it cleared it up, and it came back, and yeah, I still haven't sprayed it again. It's a good theft device.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many things that the part's just sitting there. Haven't put it on yet.
And there's a lot. I mean, especially when you're trying to, in your case, maintain one and build another, or build 2 or 3 others, you know, you run out of time. I mean, the F-Max, that was ready to go. When Tyler left here that night, it was, we're going up there, and I'm going to help him finish it, and we're driving the F-Max. And then the next morning, we're in the C-Max, and I was like, all right, cool, you know, and it was cool to meet you. It was cool to see all those cars and everything like that. But the one thing I will say about that is there wasn't another one. You know, and that's cool to me. You know, I'd rather be, you know, we're more on the car show side now, but I'd rather be the only one there. Not in a sea of, I'm not going to say any stereotypes, but a sea of those cars that was the only one made that was that color by Leroy before lunch on a Tuesday.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, though, is I didn't have the only GMC C1500 there with the Duramax in it. I know Wyatt had his as well.
Yeah.
The difference is that we knew that when we showed up to that is our goal wasn't to be competitive. Our goal was to be functional, and we were the only people there with a welder, and we were the only people there with basically an entire a tool truck to be able to get people buying. I mean, like that's what we ended up having to draw the line at with is like we would love to be able to show up and be competitive. And I knew going into that I wouldn't be competitive because you had Wyatt and Rick with 8-second Duramaxes. I've never drag raced a day in my life, much less competitively. So our original goal was to set out and run a 10-second deal, which the truck isn't. It's not going to be, you know, an 850 truck. It's not going to be a 750 truck. We might put an 850 cage in it. We might eventually push it up to that limit, but it's more so for the R&D and for me to be able to keep learning what I want to learn and pushing products further and further, whatever I want to develop further and further, and then just have the safety in it now. I mean, that's the biggest thing is having the fire suppression, having the roll cage, and then having a truck that just doesn't matter what you cut up. Whereas with the C-Max, you know, it's something that we use around the farm a lot. I don't have a 2017 F-250 with the 6.7 in it to pull all the hay bales across the field. I use the 67, and when you take it to Cletus and Cars one weekend and bring it back and it's got a rod knock, it kind of slows down moving all them hay bales or whatever else you got to do around the farm. Right. So we knew that was catching up with us, and we also knew like we were just out of safety with it. And the flip side to it too is I don't exactly get bored, but I've got a lot of different things that I want to play with all in the same time because you gain a little bit of an understanding from everything. You know, I started playing with Briggs and Strattons, which are just single cylinder magneto carbureted engines, and then you move to a small block. Now you got a distributor with 8 Briggs and Strattons, 4 on each side, and same carburetor setup and some other stuff. You pick up a little bit more knowledge. And then you move over to big block. So if you add more displacement to it, it makes more power. Fuel efficiency goes down for some reason. I haven't figured that one out yet, but and then you get a little bit braver and you pick up a wiring harness and you start learning some of the computers and fuel injection and play with an LS, and then you start playing with the diesel stuff, and then there's no longer a throttle body and everything's either fuel or air controlled, and it's a completely different setup and the tuning's different. And then you're like, all right, we've got the Duramaxes with common rail and everything else. What's something different? You're telling me that in 95 Mercedes had an indirect injected engine that just absolutely trumps everybody for power. I mean, whenever I think of the IDI diesels, I think of just absolute garbage. The 6.5 Detroits, the 6.2 Detroits, the 6.9 IDIs from Ford, the 7.3 IDIs from Ford. I mean, they're just absolutely junk motors. So when you show me an indirect injected motor that has the ability to perform and has the ability to drive like no other engine to be, even compared within, I want to be able to figure out what makes this engine so special. How do they manage to make it work like that, and what sets it apart? So it's just constantly learning from one thing to the next and the day that we stop learning is the day that we stop hot rodding.
Yep. And I have a buddy that he's wants to get into this so bad, and I've pretty much offered him every avenue that he could possibly get into it. And I'm like, go find a blown up LS. Go find one that the rods are knocking on it. Go find something that's a problem. Go pick it up for a couple $100. I said, you can borrow my engine stand, put it on the engine stand, tear it apart, see what's inside of it. Fix what you think's broke, put it back together. If it runs, you improved it. If it never runs again, it didn't run when it came to you, so you didn't improve it or make it worse. You're fine. But you got to learn, because like transmission stuff is still magic. Motor spins it this way, and somehow it produces it out the other end. I've watched people take transmissions apart. I got confused watching them. It's not for me. I've seen the inside of it. I'm not patient enough to put balls back where they're supposed to be at, and because if you put it over there, it doesn't work the right way, and I'm good with that. People that mess with that stuff, way above me. And I know that because I've seen the inside of one. But if you want to keep pushing, I mean, you have to push yourself. Like you said, knowledge, more knowledge. Maybe you get in there and you figure out, well, you know what? I'm not going to be the guy that builds a motor. Summit, Jeg, Speedway, Jasper, they all sell motors. You ain't got to build your motor. Or go talk to one of us that are brain dead and want to beat our heads against the wall and take a perfectly good running motor apart just to re-ring it and re-bearing it and put it back in. That's what I did with my small block. It's still stock bore. I didn't even change the pistons. I just re-rung them and stuck them back in.
I can't tell you how many of my buddies, we take the LSs apart and just add a little extra ring gap in there to be able to handle the boost. I mean, if you don't do that, the rings butt together from the heat and it cracks the piston or just destroys the cylinder and everything else. I mean, realistically, when I was 12 years old, I found a Briggs & Stratton lawnmower in the dump, and I decided to take it home with me and started taking the whole thing apart. And when my parents got home, they were absolutely furious that the garage was an absolute wreck from this 12-year-old that took a lawnmower apart in the garage. And my mother told me to, get rid of it, clean up the garage. So the next day when I got back from school, I started originally I started throwing everything into the trash, and then I realized, well, what do I lose by putting it all back together and seeing what I can make happen? So I went ahead and put everything kind of back together where I thought it belonged or where it fit and everything else. And for some reason, I put gas in it later that evening, and the thing ran really good for about 5 minutes until it locked up because I didn't put engine oil back in it. Let me tell you, engine oil, very valuable lesson learned there.
It is required.
But that's where it all started with, was just a simple thrown away lawnmower, and that's gone downhill ever since then. I mean, you got to start with the basics to it, and lawnmowers are, at least they used to be, pretty basic engine. There was no fuel injection. There was nothing else to it. I mean, you took a bolt out, you put a bolt back in, and all the hard parts were there. They're single cylinder engines, so it's not like you're trying to learn the complexity behind it. You just have to focus on that single operation, and then once you move to the car engines, it's just repetitive. 4 cylinders, 6 cylinders, 8 cylinders, and so on.
That's a good way to think about it. Break it down. It's just 8 single cylinders. I mean, yes, you have to make sure that they all go up and down at the right times and spark at the right time, or diesel just compress at the right time. But it's an event. Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. All right, babe, hit us with the dates for this coming up March.
All right. Well, we have the Moonshine Reliability Run, March 14th and 15th, and that's going to be starting in Fort White, Florida. And you can visit Moonshine Reliability Run on Instagram for details and for registration and all the good stuff.
I don't know if we're going to make that one, but we might.
Yeah.
We're still in the planning stages.
Yes.
All right. Well, before we run through all of our awesome sponsors, go ahead and run down the businesses that help make you successful.
I mean, there are so many to list. I'm going to try to go through all of them. I know we have HSP Diesel. Those guys have been absolutely phenomenal to some of my builds where, I've got an idea but don't have the time to fabricate the part. I'm able to call them up. I wanted a set of true 2-inch up pipes instead of 2 3/4 or 1 3/4 inch up pipes, and said, "Hey, I want a true 2-inch up pipe." They did it, no questions asked. Those guys are true hot rod enthusiasts, and I love the stuff that they've done, the help that they've done with the F-Max. We've got Exergy Performance. They help with all the fuel systems in the truck. Diesel engines don't have spark plugs or anything else, so the injector is a very crucial part to the operation of the diesel engine. And Exergy Performance goes so far and above what just OEM or a past test is to them. So they've been a very key player in making sure that we're able to get the power and performance out of these diesel engines. We've got Blessed Performance. Those guys are just incredible for helping with a wide variety of parts. I know they're more of a parts reseller, but they speak hot rod or diesel performance, whichever way you want to look at it. So whether you're playing with a 6-liter Power Stroke or a Duramax, they kind of know every single platform and know the direction to point you in. Trying to think who else we have. Normally have a list of everybody, but I know for Sick Week, give a huge shout out to Tyler. I mean, he drove all the way up from Florida to Alabama to help work on a truck that we ended up not working on. But once we got to Sick Week, I mean, I would go to turn my time slip in, and he'd be changing the tires out on the truck by the time I got back, which nothing I ever asked of him or anything else, but an absolutely amazing person. BTW Racing, I know they help with a couple of the custom fabricated parts. There's just some other parts that we're working on that are very custom that I have to help develop and other stuff. And those guys are willing to come over from Georgia, or I'll go over to Georgia and we'll play with some of the lathes and other stuff to be able to get the piston cuts right and just all kinds of other miscellaneous stuff. And they've been around for a pretty good while now, helping us with all of our builds. FTI converters. Holy cow, FTI. You want to talk about a converter that has got no business taking the amount of abuse that it has. I mean, we do some pretty ignorant things to transmissions, and we've been using the FTI stuff in all of our deals, and I have been blown away by the durability from their products. I mean, that has been, I think I still have the original converter from the 67 from 21, and it has never checked up. I've never sent it back to FTI against them asking to have it back a couple of times. But no, their products have been absolutely amazing. And then Hawks Diesel Performance, I know they do a lot of the parts sales as well, mostly the Duramax stuff. And he is like the Cody Hawk from Hawks Diesel Performance. It'll be a Tuesday afternoon, and I'll realize I need a certain part, and I'll send him a message, and he'll get me the parts either overnighted or whatever to make sure that I get the parts in time. So they've been very helpful in the stuff that we've done. So, and I'm sure there's, like I said, there's a whole bunch of other individuals and different other companies that have helped out throughout the years. But right now, those are the big ones. And, I'm sure if you look at some of the content on the TikTok or the Instagram, you'll be able to see those companies tagged in the post for how they've helped or whatnot.
I should have had your back and brought up your Facebook post that you just made about that. I know you just tagged everybody.
Well, I want to grab my phone and look at it, and I thought about going out to the truck and looking at the side of the truck, but I know, I'm pretty sure AirDog. The people that make the fuel go from the fuel tank to the CP3, the injection system with filters on it to make sure that you don't get any debris in that nice Exergy fuel system. Yeah, they're on the truck as well. They do an amazing job. The biggest thing with AirDog compared to anybody else is their customer support. I've been using AirDog, not sponsored or anything, since 2017, and like those guys, in the beginning, they had a couple of issues with their pumps, which was a well-known fact. However, like if you had a pump failure, I remember I had a pump failure on one of my trucks. I called up AirDog and said, "Hey, got a pump failure." They said, "Not an issue," and they asked for what the address was that the pump was registered to, made sure that I filled out my warranty card and everything else, and they literally overnighted me a pump, like back in 2018. No questions asked. They got me a pump. They got me taken care of. I mean, that's not from the sponsor side of it. Obviously, I work with them now, but that was back before being sponsored, and those are the kinds of guys that you want to have the products on your diesel pickup truck, because when something goes wrong, they're going to be there to help. They're not going to ask you to be, oh, you got to take the part off of your truck and then send it back to us to have a warranty inspection done, and then it gets there and, oh, well, you ran the wrong grade of diesel in your truck, you've got contaminated fuel or something else, and they don't warranty it. AirDog has literally just been, nope, here's the part, overnighted, no questions asked. But I'm pretty sure that's everybody on the side of the truck, because I was going to walk out there and look at it, but I literally put all the big stickers on the side of the F-Max, so FTI, AirDog, Extra G, Hawks Diesel Performance, Blessed Performance, and HSP. Those are all on the F-Max right now, and they are key players to the diesel performance game that I'm playing.
Awesome. Well, speaking of Tyler Yawn, would like to welcome the newest advertiser on the Hot Rod Hangout podcast, Why Not Fab. Go check them out on Facebook, Insta, and TikTok.
Oh, yes. And be sure to visit Throttle Addict and use the code word HOTROD for 15% off.
Make sure you go check out Johnny Jalopy, Facebook, YouTube, JohnnyJalopy.com.
And be sure to go check out Low Income Clothing, Low Income Photos, Baramagan Media, all on Facebook and Instagram.
And make sure you go show some love for Wrenching for the Future. They're getting kids back where they belong, working on cars. You can check them out on Facebook, Instagram, and the TikTok.
And don't forget to book an appointment with Ty Blends from Top Notch Barber Studio. You can find him on Instagram or TyBlends1 on Booksy.com to book an appointment.
And if you'd like to get on that list, please reach out. We would love to advertise your business, especially if you're cool. We'll never represent anybody that we don't actually support, but please go show them all some support. And if you're a business out there and you want to hear your name listed at every podcast and every live, please reach out, because Lord knows that this shit ain't cheap. But thank you again for coming on an episode, and looking forward for maybe bombing down next year at Sick Week with you. I think you're going to lose your co-driver, though, because I'm pretty sure he's going to be there in his own shit.
I'm kind of upset about that, because, I mean, that is probably, like, the best co-pilot I've ever seen or ever had. And then he was, like, the entire time, he's like, I'm getting my tickets. We're taking something next year. I was like, great. So I can't even bring something next year and have it, like, an amazing co-pilot. So that's probably how Nick felt whenever I was like, I'm going to do it this year. Lost his co-pilot.
He did it by himself, too, right?
He did. So that was, I mean, I'm sure he enjoyed it and everything, but he and I have been talking about it. And I think, I mean, the biggest thing that I had scheduled for this year was to do Sick Week. That was the only thing I told the sponsors I was going to do. That's the only thing that I really planned on doing, because right now I'm trying to get my wife through college. And as you can imagine, tuition and all the other stuff that she needs to be able to do good and succeed in that isn't exactly cheap. And so as such, we're like, all right, we're just going to do Sick Week. And then I think we're going to do the Poor Diesel Challenge again this year. However, I'm not building a truck for it. And yeah, we're just kind of slowing it down for this year.
Is your wife involved with all the car aspect of your life?
Yes and no. Like, so when we originally first got together, she would always ride with me down to, like, Cletus and Cars or whatever we're doing. And there's any day I could ask her to go on an event with me and she'll she won't question it. She is not mechanically minded. And, if I need somebody to help me, like, bleed brakes in a car or something like that, she's more than capable of doing on something. She'd be the one that is, turning wrenches on the truck. She's not going to be sitting there helping me directly turn wrenches. But it works out, though, because as much fun as it would be to be able to have my wife helping me turn wrenches on the truck, she helps in so many other ways that aren't even fathomable to the average car guy. Because as I'm sitting there working on the truck, she's in the kitchen making dinner, making sure that I've got a good hot meal, making sure that I've got the sheets are changed on the bed, the house is clean, the dogs are fed. Like, she is doing so many other things that, you know, it'd be great to have a second set of hands, but the stuff that she does is worth so much more.
Yeah, it's always good when you have somebody that supports the car addiction that we all have, even if they're not directly out there. Ashley gets mad when I work on stuff without her, but she has all those other duties that you just listed, and she takes care of all those, and she allows me to go out and play with cars. So trying to get this Hood Rat hot rod, it actually looks like a car again, so I'm happy about that. There for a little while, it didn't even resemble what it was, so that's good. But thank you again for coming on. Well, till next time, guys, get out and drive your shit.
See ya.
Later.